Right, just before we start, just a bit of housekeeping. Just remind everyone to keep their mobile phones and laptops or any devices on silent or on airplane mode. Would appreciate it. We've got no fire alarms due tonight, so the fire exits were down the bottom, at the corner over there, and at there, the gallery. We've got Gary at the door. He'll give you a little wave. He will make sure that he takes you out. And in the committee room at the back, we've got members of staff that will take you out the fire exits as well. Just a couple of things before we start. Just to remind the public in the gallery and the committee room that this is for observation only and observers. It is a formal meeting, so please be orderly. I'd appreciate your time for coming here tonight and enjoy the meeting. Also, I'd like to pass on our regards to Sue Dunkley, who has been leaving after 38 years in the Civic role, who has been looking after people like me, and Harry, and many other mayors that are in this room. Okay, so we'll start the agenda. Apologies for absence, please. Councillor Snaith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have apologies from Councillor Dawson and Councillor Charles Archer.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinness.
Thank you. We've got apologies from Councillor Cable Athwell and Councillor Sam Revel.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, Councillor Major?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As seems to be the quite topical at the moment, I found myself copied into an email yesterday, and some other emails as well. I'm not sure if it was by design or inadvertently, but the emails were from one of the landowners to our head of planning, contradicting some elements of the report, and also contradicted what we was told in the briefing on only last week. I just wondered if the head of planning wants to clarify any of those points, because given the fact that it contradicts what's in the report, I'm concerned that the report isn't valid.
Okay, we'll pass it on to Mr. Birkinshaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have too been in receipt of an email today from a landowner of the site at Cotmanhay North. That email confirms that there is no development agreement in place, as we said in the report, and that therefore the site has shown lamentably lack of progress over the last 5 years that it's been promoted.
Thank you, Mr. Birkinshaw. Does that clarify your answer, Councillor Major?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the response. It doesn't quite, but I guess that the ruling is going to be that we're going to carry on regardless, because that seems to be the order of the day.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm councillor for Erewash, a ward member and parish council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got?
I'm a parish councillor at Draycott in Churchville Parish Council.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Maskett.
I'm a parish councillor for Ackbrook and Borough.
Okay. Councillor Hart.
If we have to, Madam Mayor, I'm Chairman of West Ham Parish Council.
Councillor Parry.
Chairman of San Diego Parish Council.
Parish Council member at San Diego.
Also West Ham Parish Council.
I perhaps should have asked nobody. It's a part of parish council, shouldn't I?
Madam Mayor, they don't need to make this declaration.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got the gist of the parish councillors. Thank you very much.
Parish Councillor.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to public questions. Just to remind that the question that's been put forward, there's no debate and follow up on the question, and this is the question is brought to be asked by Beverly Harrison, of the lead member of the Town Centre Regeneration and Planning, Councillor Howard. So all yours.
Can I also point out I'm an admin from Kirkhallam Green Squeeze, and I'm a councillor for Standbydale as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Space is all yours.
Right. I think that's right. Is the sale of brownfield land opposite New Stanton Park now cancelled? As many people have now been informed the owners may not wish to sell. If so, is this a transgression of brownfield first policy, especially considering within proposed core strategy strategic policy 1 housing, this is integral to a 1,000 new house agenda, also included within several related documents. This is a game changer to the whole core strategy, as the result of such huge number loss and site reduction is indicative it's become even more flawed. That being the case, why is the core strategy not being scrapped and redrawn with a more relevant, up-to-date and diverse plan which encompasses a variety of new homes of all sizes and prices, which are more fairly and evenly allocated across all Erewash in smaller developments to better cater for all the public's needs and avoid vast overburdening of already struggling areas like the undemocratically unrecognised historic village of Kirkhallam with excessive housing?
Thank you for your time. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, may I extend my thanks to Ms Harrison for her question. The regeneration of the Stanton site has been a priority for this council for nearly 20 years. The council has consistently and positively worked with the owners of the northern part of the site, which is now showing very positive signs of redevelopment. Jobs are already being created, and I know that there are some very exciting opportunities emerging on the rest of the site too. At its peak, the old Stanton Ironworks employed nearly 10,000 people. It is only fitting that we pursue the creation of good jobs at that site, bringing proper industry back to Ilkeston. It's been a long and hard road to get this progress on the northern site that is now plainly visible. The allocation of new homes south of the Stanton site in this plan is also an important part of that regeneration project. That Stanton might not just be a place of work, but for people to live their lives with good jobs, together forging a community. It will also be an undeniably hard and long road to secure the regeneration of the site referred to in this question, owned by Saint-Gobain. We have no reason to believe that Saint-Gobain does not still intend to move away from the site in the near future, no matter any statements being made and floating around in public. I will note that the line of argument that they no longer mean to move was raised at the examination by the independent planning inspector last year. We are here this evening because the planning inspector came away from that inquiry with a number of recommendations stemming, and the plan has been amended accordingly. Where the inspector did have severe concerns about a site, the one in Cotmanay, we have removed it. The planning inspector expressed no serious concerns about the South Stanton site, and thus it remains part of the plan. That said, the inspector knows, and we fully acknowledge, that that site does have its difficulties. As such, the planning inspector recommended that we find small sites, here meaning fewer than 250 new homes, taken from the Greenbelt, to help improve our 5-year land supply, and in the hope that a plan will be able to deliver more new homes dispersed more evenly around the borough and faster. In line with those recommendations, we have made the amendments that are before full council today for resubmission to the Independent Planning Inspectorate. It is very clearly national planning policy, even following the December 2024 National Planning Policy Framework revision, that new homes should be assigned to brownfield sites before allocating greenbelt land for new homes. We must then take whatever opportunity we have to assign new homes to brownfield sites, especially one this large, in order to comply with national planning policy favouring brownfield regeneration. So, the South Stanton site remains in the plan. Both we and the planning inspector continue to have faith in its eventual ability to deliver, and the council considers its redevelopment a core part of our commitments that homes should be built on brownfield land where it is available. It is also very important to our broader commitment to regeneration on the Stanton site as a whole. In line with the ask that the plan be more diverse, both in its geographic allocation and with the provision of a greater number of affordable and social homes, this is being put forward this evening before councillors. But the plan simply cannot be scrapped and redone. This government, and the previous government before it, have both made it very clear that it is not acceptable for councils to be without plans for years on end, and that the specific case in Erewash, where our plan has been out of date for 6 years, and we have never once met housing targets, is unacceptable. The threat is, if we were to not make good and timely progress towards having an in-place and adopted plan, the council's planning powers could simply be taken away. I do not believe, and I don't think anyone here believes, that planning powers being taken out of our elected local hands and given to Whitehall civil servants would be the best outcome for the Stanton site, for Kirkhallam, or for anyone in Erewash. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. We'll just allow the speaker and the guests to leave the chambers. Thank you. Can I remind people that the mobile phones are to be switched off? I did request that at the beginning. Thank you. I'll just give our guests a chance to get up to the gallery. It's unfair for them to not hear the rest of this. Okay, they're in the gallery. I've given the opportunity to make sure that you're up there before we started again. Okay, so we'll carry on to item number 4, Core Strategy Review Amendment. This is a report of the Director of Resources, which is requesting approval to consult on the modifications of the Core Strategy Review as set out in the Core Strategy Review Amendment and supported by the Sustainability Appraisal Update and to authorise the submission of these modifications and this subsequent consultation responses to the ongoing examination of the Core Strategy Review. I'll put my teeth back in now. I believe Councillor Howard has asked me if it's possible for an extension of the 5 minutes, which I'll pass on to the lead speaker as well, that the extension has both been approved for both of you. And I'll pass this over to Councillor Howard. Thank you.
Thank you again, Your Worship. May I first commend the hard work and dedication of our planning officers in ensuring this amended plan is here before us today. Following the outcome of last summer's examination by the planning inspector, our planning team were given a breakneck schedule with which to considerably amend the plan, saddled with numerous external constraints totally beyond our control. Some of our planning officers have been working on this plan since it was in its infancy 6 years ago, and I know that the work has been tough, especially so since last September. I would implore all councillors at the start of this debate that whatever problems they might have with planning policy, either locally or nationally, they not demean the efforts or professionalism of our hard-working planning team. They deserve our full respect. Now, we have a plan before us. Erewash Borough Council last adopted a housing plan in 2014, more than a decade ago. As these plans are supposed to last for 5 years, this went out of date in 2019. That plan adopted then has also demonstrably failed. I want to say right away that that's not a partisan point, just that the currently in force plan aside all new housing growth to Stanton, and that there haven't been any new homes built there. I'll say now, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, that this borough has has never, not once, met its housing target since their introduction in 2011. Our plan is out of date, we have not delivered enough new homes, and so we urgently need to adopt a new plan. This plan began development in 2019, again nearly 6 years ago. It was submitted for examination to the Planning Inspectorate in late 2022. In late 2023, in line with our manifesto commitment, we attempted to amend the plan to make changes from which we were blocked by the then government. And so it proceeded to examination in the summer of 2024, where the planning inspector found numerous deficiencies. These included a lack of policy basis by which sites were allocated, sustainability assessments only having been carried out after sites were chosen, and the failure to conduct a Greenbelt review, so that we would understand which parts of the Greenbelt functioned well, so as to meet its stated purposes, and which did not. I won't go into whether or not I think these objections from the planning inspector were fair, it varies, but the principal concern, one for which I have full sympathy, is that it literally did not deliver enough new homes. Obviously, if your housing plan fails to be delivering the number of new homes that it's meant to be, then it is deficient and requires significant amendment. Per this, in line with the inspector's recommendations, we have amended the plan. This has required finding space for around 850 new homes spread across a number of small sites, again in this context small meaning around about 250 or smaller, adjacent to Erewash's principal villages, all in line with the inspector's recommendations. As a result of severe doubts raised by the inspector over the viability of the previously included Cotmanay Wood development, it has been removed from the plan, and due to factors well beyond our control, it appears unlikely that said development will come forward within a reasonable amount of time. It not being included in this plan does not mean that it cannot and never will come forward, only that we're not sure enough that it will to allow inclusion. As I've alluded to, the situation of this plan, and we all as councillors are in today, is deeply unusual. The previous government used its powers to block us from amending the plan back in 2023, which was near unprecedented. This mechanism from the planning inspectorate, whereby we've had a strict 6-month deadline to amend and resubmit the plan, giving way to a new round of public consultation and another examination later this year, essentially a plan within a plan, is also near unprecedented. But it seems to me that these actions have been taken by government and by the inspectorate because they recognise that it is absolutely essential that we must have some form of plan in place. We need a plan, this is the plan we have, and it has now been made workable. So we must vote to adopt it this evening. Your Worship, I can also confirm that in the past week I have received and responded to dozens of emails from members of the public. I have thanked them for contacting me, as I fully understand the impact these proposals will have on people's beloved communities. It is only right that they are listened to and engaged with in a forthright, honest and pragmatic manner. In that spirit, I have foremost emphasised that the Council will shortly hold a full 6-week period of consultation on these proposals, as is required by law. I have seen drafts for said consultation already, and it should be underway as soon as next month. That in just a week, so many people have been able to contact me, and that so many people have come here this evening, to me suggests that the 6-week period should be ample time to allow as many people to be listened to as they wish. This consultation will be followed later this year by an inquiry into the plan by the independent planning inspectorate, which will again take the form of public hearings held locally and again solicit and consider the views of local residents. I have also made clear that sustainability assessments have been made on the proposed sites, covering a range of potential environmental, infrastructural and social impacts the sites might have, The council issued a new call for sites last September, and these sustainability assessments were conducted on all sites that came forward and were in line with the Planning Inspectorate's recommendations. Additionally, the council have made contact with relevant local providers of infrastructure and public services, confirming that in most cases a financial contribution from the developer will be required to add the additional capacity that these homes require should they be built. It is absolutely a priority that that developers are held to these commitments, so that we might properly deliver for both current and potential future Erewash residents. We have a legal duty to deliver new homes. I've mentioned housing targets, and whilst I know many in this room will disagree, that's a requirement I support and respect. The previous Conservative government made it clear that in 2023, Erewash's historic failure to deliver new homes, meet housing targets, and have an up-to-date local plan in place was unacceptable. Likewise, the current government has made clear that willing failure to deliver new homes is unacceptable, and that having long-outdated local plans is too. The threat from both the previous and current governments was that if we failed in this, the council's planning power might be taken away. That's not what I want. I don't think it's what any councillor in this room wants of any party. But it goes beyond legal duty. To the young families who want to buy their first home, to people paying ever-rising rents, to the 5,000 people on Erewash's social housing waiting list, we have a duty to build new homes. To restore the dream of home ownership to young people, to working people, and to growing families. It's a public duty, it's a social duty, and it's a moral duty. This is our chance now to meet that call, to do our part locally to combat the housing crisis, to build new houses that become homes from which people can live their lives as all deserve a chance to do. Help restore the dream of home ownership, help first-time buyers get on the ladder and young families to grow. Help bring rents down so young people can go out and spend their money stimulating our local economies rather than paying their landlord's mortgage. This plan is our chance as a council to help make all of that happen. So, Your Worship, I move recommendations from the report 2.1 A, B and C. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Can I remind members, please don't talk over other people when they're talking in the chambers, please, especially disruption for other people in the gallery and the committee room. They won't be able to hear while people are speaking. Thank you. Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Everett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second this and reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Major, would you like to speak? You have the extended time as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I may not need that, I may. We've already seen that even the landowners in regards don't quite agree with the report as it's written. We've also seen other errors in the report, but it's not disrespectful to officers. It sounds like they've been given a breathtaking task of doing it as quickly as possible, which is always disappointing. But the report is full of assumptions made about so many things, from housing needs to the costs, the market conditions, etc. And there's also very little mention, very little at all, if any, joined up thinking on infrastructure. There's nothing in the report about road networks being able to handle 500 additional homes a year. Nothing on school places. Nothing on GP surgeries. Now we have heard that they've asked the relevant bodies. I'm not quite sure if that's entirely accurate as well, given some the things that other people have told us. But what is clear is that our planning officers may be very good planners, but they're not experts on roads, on schools, on healthcare provision, and there's nothing in the report from those experts. So even if they've been asked, there's nothing reflecting the needs in the report of that. There's some vague concept about primary care, but what does that mean in real terms? Will it mean more GP appointments? Will it mean new school places? Will it even mean will it even mean we have enough education places to look after our children in education? There's serious concerns about many sites. There's one in my own division which the proposed access route to it is at the end of a very small cul-de-sac that already has problems with buses going through it in one of the most beautiful spots and the only bit of green buffer between Sandiacre and the M1 in that area. But despite all these things, that we can get him down into telling us, maybe during the consultation. But the most disgraceful part of this process is the wish of the council to do the absolute bare minimum in terms of public consultation. The timing of the report being published and of the briefing to councillors was deliberately done so it would fall after the ability of the public to ask public questions at this meeting. I think it's deliberate. There's no reason why do you as council not want to face public scrutiny? So I know a lot of you are hell bent on building as many houses as you can. I see a little smirky grin off some of you then. I know you are, and I know I'm probably not going to convince you of anything else, but maybe some of you are a bit ashamed, maybe just a few of you are a little bit ashamed that you're disregarding the public and not even giving them a chance to have a say and be listened to and have their questions answered. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to put that right. That's what I'm going to do tonight, because we can deal with the other things within the consultation. So I'm going to propose an amendment that we increase the consultation period to 12 weeks, and not just do that, actually actively engage with the public. So my amendment also calls for the council to go and do road shows, go to the village halls, listen to the people that's come tonight, so that they can get meaningful responses to their questions and concerns, and know that they've been listened to because they get to talk to somebody face to face. I really hope that at a minimum, I know you're hell-bent on building the houses, but at a minimum, please, let the residents have a voice.
Thank you, Councillor Major. Do you have somebody to second? Councillor Eby.
I second the amendment and reserve my right to speak.
Okay, so open up the debate for...
Hang on, I'd like to see the wording.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. Apologies for the delay. We're just having a look at the amendment. Okay. Okay, so we're going to open it up to debate. Councillor Everett. Yeah, the amendment. Apologies. Yeah, highlight that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As always, I find Councillor Major sinks lower than he usually does, which is a real shame because I come in here hoping to have a proper discussion. 6-week consultation is more than enough. We've had a lot of feedback over just the past week. And Councillor Major knows that because whilst we have given people a chance to speak, we've had a public speaker today. Not sure if he noticed, but we did. If Councillor Major noticed, which is what I think I said, we did have a public speaker. The reason Councillor Major thinks people didn't have a chance to speak is that he purposely put out leaflets and into people's homes and onto lampposts after the time that people were allowed to speak, which is why people are disappointed this evening. So Councillor Major and his colleagues doing that is incredibly disappointing, and that is why people have not been able to speak tonight. There is robust consultation about to happen. I would also note that he doesn't actually believe in consultation, because in 2022, when this plan initially came to council, an amendment came to do 12 weeks.
Councillor Major, sorry to interrupt. Can I remind everyone to be quiet while others are speaking? You will have your opportunity. Thank you very much.
And he refused. He only wanted 6 weeks, because 6 weeks is actually more than enough. 6 weeks is more than enough for people to feed in, and other consultations, you usually get people coming in the first couple of weeks and it tails off towards the end. But I believe 6 weeks is more than enough, and I'll be voting down this amendment because I do not believe it's actually what Councillor Major wants. I believe he is just trying to stir the pot rather than making significant contributions to the amendment tonight.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I just thought then I was in a parallel universe somewhere, because I remember this very similar amendment to this, almost word for word, which was put forward by the Labour group at the October meeting in 2022, asking for a 12-week consultation period. And the answer was, no, 6 weeks is more than adequate. We don't want to bore the public. You won't get any more people turning up. So I'm sorry. You know, this is typical of the hypocrisy that we get from this party opposite. It really is sickening that they can dictate to others, but not give themselves. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bilby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think what Councillor Major has suggested is a fair, very fair result for the people out there. You're supposed to be democratic across there, democratic, and you're stopping people having a say in what happens to their land and their surrounds and their green spaces. So I shall be voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Given that Councillor Phillips has just said that his group called for a 12-week consultation previously, and Councillor Major is calling for one now, it would appear that we're all in agreement, would it not?
Councillor Muscular.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is 6 weeks, 12 weeks. Is it democratic? Nobody's put a label on how long is democratic and how short is not democratic. 6 weeks is a month and a half. You know, that seems quite long enough for anybody to issue their feelings on a certain subject, whatever that subject may be, in this case, this subject. I think saying, oh, we need 12 weeks to make it democratic is a foolhardy argument. 6 weeks is democratic. It gives everybody a chance, more than a chance, and you better believe at the end of week 6, it won't be coming in thick and furious like it did in the first 2 weeks. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. When the leading group were in opposition, they asked for the same amendment in 2022. Tonight it looks like they're going to deny the public that opportunity. How tables turn. Talk of hypocrisy is bewildering. I will be supporting this amendment. It gives the people of Erewash a stronger personal voice. It gives all residents the opportunity to express their thoughts and opinions towards the council as its entirety. Of course, at a later time it remains to be seen where votes will go, but whether the residents have been heard or not will also remain to be seen. Word doesn't spread as quickly as you think. Not everyone has the internet or buys a newspaper. The more time given to all stakeholders to air their concerns and opinions is better and is of most importance. It's disappointing that tonight residents' voice has not been heard. They should be heard loud and clear. A decent amount of time for consultation must be given, and 12 weeks is not too much to ask. Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will once again emphasise to Councillor that we are operating on a time scale set by the Independent Planning Inspectorate, which is beyond our control. I mentioned the time limit began in September last year as being 6 months. As it is now clearly the end of March, the timeline is already quite stretched. The legally required 6-week consultation period will begin in early April. When this concludes in mid-May, consultations will be considered fully by planning officers. We will then go forward to a public inquiry held by the Independent Planning Inspectorate later this year, which will again consider the submissions and views of local residents, as well as those of both landowners proposed and landowners that haven't been proposed, and of the relevant infrastructure providers. And so, it is regrettably not acceptable that there would be any further delay in this process, and we would surely be penalised by the Planning Inspectorate were we to take more time than is normal and expected. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, we've got the legal limit, but the legal limit isn't always useful for us. The fact is that we live, eat and sleep all this work. We're councillors. We're working on the internet and social media. There are an awful lot of people that haven't got that facility. Plus the fact, of course, that a lot of people don't know about this. They also don't know how to object. They want to talk to local councillors to find out. They've got to give valid planning reasons why. It's not just a matter of, well, we don't like the sites. It's very easy, just send an email. And I can assure you, the emails do keep coming. I had a lot of emails, I can assure you, and I responded to everyone, as your previous lead member would have said. Didn't always agree with what I sent back to him, but I always gave an explanation as why. But I think that is why we need to give our residents plenty of time to be able to formulate their worries, concerns. As I say, it's very easy for us. We're in this, we're doing it day to day, and we know what's happening. A lot of people out there still do not know about this happening and what an impact it will have on the whole of Erewash. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor White.
The people of Borough have not been consulted at all yet. The Otbrook and Borough Parish Council have not allowed them to have a meeting, and there's still many people in Borough that are going to be affected by this that have not had a chance to meet and to discuss, and it's going to take more than one meeting. We would ask for the 12 weeks, please.
Councillor Snave.
I just want to point out that the consultation starts once we actually agree this. So the councillors opposite saying that they haven't been consulted, this is the start of the consultation. You're trying to mislead the public by saying they haven't been consulted when this is the start of the process.
Councillor Eady, you have the right to speak.
Thank you very much. I don't think we've misled the public at all, if I'm absolutely honest with you. I think the public will actually admit that the paperwork came out on the 19th, and according to our agenda, the last time they could actually submit questions is the 17th. So the public couldn't actually... It's when the paperwork came out. No, the paperwork came out on the 19th, so people didn't know what was going to be included in the submission, so how could they ask questions on something they did not know was going to be included? I absolutely agree with Councillor Mills. You guys, if that was the case, stated 12 weeks, why are you not going to support this now? And why has it taken from September to now to bring this to the council? If we're on a tight deadline, how has it taken that long? I've spoken to residents when I've been doing the school run and speaking to members of the public, and they don't know this is happening. And it's scary when you talk to people, and I don't think 6 weeks is enough for people to fully understand what is happening. I totally support this amendment, and I hope everyone else will too. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take the amendment to vote. And we have 10. Thank you. You'd already spoken, Councillor Mascot, on this already.
Not on the amendment.
Yes, he did. He spoke on the amendment. Yeah, already spoken, so that's why he's not allowed to speak again. Yeah. No, thank you for the correction. I could have been wrong. Okay, so recorded vote, I'll pass that over.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have a recorded vote on the amendment by Councillor Major, and so Councillors Alfrey.
Against.
Atkinson.
Against.
Bilby. Broadhurst.
Against.
Bryan.
Against.
Burns.
Against.
Mrs. Clare. Corbett. Doyle. Mrs. Eddy. Everett. Miss Fennelly.
Against.
Flatley. Green. M. Griffiths. Hall Evans. Hare.
Against.
Mrs. Hart. Howard. Lambert. Locke. McGuinness. Major. Maskalick. Me. Miller. Mills. Dr. Newton. Pace. F. Phillips. P. Phillips. Mrs. Poole. Sangera. Scott. Snaith. Stratford. Thomas. And Mrs. White. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, just to confirm that the amendment has been lost. Okay, so we'll go back to the original topic of Agenda 4, if there was any debates. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak sort of furthering on to what Councillor Howard said earlier about the moral case for why we need to do this. I think it's quite easy when we're talking about planning to focus on the immediate and what's happening with that particular site and to forget the wider picture. And the wider picture is that we are in a housing crisis in this country. We are in an absolute crisis. We are in the situation where we are seeing a huge rise in HMOs because people cannot afford to live. We are in the situation where rents in even places like the town we are in today in Long Eaton, if you go on to Rightmove now and look for a one-bedroom flat, and you will find rents of £850 a month. This is huge amounts which thankfully make it impossible for a person to live alone. This punishes young people extremely. What they need is housing. What we need is houses to be able to bring down those prices, to be able to bring down those rents. My auntie is in her late 30s with a family and settled. However, and you know, she is a nurse. She works for the NHS. She gives to this country. She does a lot. She has a strong profession. She said to me the other day that she will never be able to own a home because of the crisis that we are in this country. We need to give people like her the dream of home ownership. We need to give young people the chance to be able to move out of their parents' house and to rent somewhere, so that they, by having affordable rents. And the only way we do this is by building more homes for people. And I know it can be difficult. I know it can be hard in deciding the exact sites, but we need the homes. And there is a democratic mandate to do this. The Labour government last July was elected on the basis of building 1.5 million new homes across the country. This is something that is needed, and there is a mandate for it, and people want it. Now, yes, we might disagree and argue over the exact sites and where, but I think surely we have to remember on the principle that we do need homes and that people need these houses. That whenever social housing comes up in Erewash and indeed anywhere across Derbyshire or the country, there are hundreds of people who apply, thousands of people who apply for those small numbers of houses. There are 5,000 people on the social housing waiting list in Erewash. Let's not fail them. Let's give them a chance. Let's give them somewhere to live. Let's build houses. And that's why we have to vote for this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Alfrey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've too received many emails, and I felt I'd like to attach myself to the lead member's praise for the planning team regarding the significant work undertaken to produce the core strategy review. Within the emails I've had from residents regarding the core strategy that fall under my portfolio, I thought it was important that I spoke. These correspondence pertain to due diligence on the impact of drainage and sewerage across Erewash and concerns that the council will build on the Stony Clouds Nature Reserve within Sandyacre. Every site proposed under the core review amendment, which includes those retained in the original submission version, have been subjected to sustainable appraisal. Sustainable appraisal in local plans of core strategy reviews amendment is a legal framework. The methodology for producing sustainable appraisals, as set out in the National Planning Guidance, is in accordance and incorporates environmental assessments and processes under the environmental assessment plans and programmes. These legislations require statutory consultees, including the Environment Agency, Natural England, and to be engaged and objectives set out in studies. The sustainable appraisal supporting the core strategy amendment has complied with all of these requirements. Through sustainable appraisal, every site has been assessed. These include Sustainability Objective 12, and this has been some of the emails that I've received regarding flooding concerns, and rightly so because of the issues we had with Storm Babette, flooding and water quality. Consequently, the impact on every site on drainage sewages had been given professional consideration. It is noted that none of the proposed housing sites are in areas identified as risk of flooding by the Environment Agency. Well, furthermore, because of the scale of these proposals, they can each support sustainable urban drainage SUDs in a way that similar urban infill sites cannot. Due to the soil conditions within Erewash, these typically involve detention ponds that hold sub-drainage water and intense rainfall. Utilising these systems in new housing developments can achieve drainage discharge rates no greater than the natural rate. Using sustainable SUDs avoids water drainage being directly into public sewers, which is the main cause for the sewage failure. Consequently, the impact of the new housing developments on existing sewage networks is relatively minor compared to the impact of older housing developments. Furthermore, under the Water Industry Act 1991, local sewerage undertaken is by Severn Trent Water. They're obliged to deal with foul and sewerage and any new development. Where improvement of sewerage system is required, it falls under Severn Trent, who are legally obliged to make such improvements. Severn Trent Limited have already been consulted on the infrastructure implications within the core strategy amendment. They have confirmed that the sewerage system in the house villages and plots can cope with the new development proposed, as such not put forward any reason to resist any of the development. In summary, the drainage and sewage impact on the core strategy review amendment have been thoroughly and professionally lawfully considered, and within reference on Stony Clouds, this is a designated local nature reserve, as such has protections against development upon it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, the reason that this plan has been revised at breakneck speed is because when the Tories were in charge, pre-May 2023, they did not adopt a viable core strategy for years and years and years. What hasn't been stressed tonight is that this plan is good for Erewash. This plan has been revised and is in line with the independent planning inspector's legal requirements and demands. And sympathetic, small-scale developments alongside our villages are good for the villages. Without new homes, you won't have new families moving into the area, and the population will age. Primary schools may close, shops will not be viable, pubs will disappear, and church congregations will shrink yet further. New homes bring new families, bring new life to the villages. This plan is good for Erewash. Under the Tories' opposite, the borough has never met its housing targets in 20 years. This plan will get homes being built. This plan kicks off a public consultation, and we welcome it. This plan is good for Erewash, and I will be voting for it tonight.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The last two times I've spoken at full council, I didn't quite articulate myself as I would like to have done, or quite got the words out that I would intend. and tonight I'm a little bit more prepared. Last night I attended an extra meeting at Draycott and Churchwell Parish Council. I, along with Councillor Mrs Clare, are both sitting parish councillors there and borough councillors here for Draycott and Risley. I stand tonight here to represent the residents of Draycott who gave the parish council last night a resounding no to these proposals. As a council, we, from all political alliances, whether nailed to a tree or not, listen to our residents and strive to do our best for them. The reason for this meeting last night, to discuss the core strategy. I counted the residents in their attendance for myself, 62, unprecedented in living memory. Before residents aired their views, it was a concern that questions for this chamber here tonight were dismissed. Although consultation will no doubt take place, it was the opinion of some present last night that it was unreasonable to publish the agenda for this meeting almost 48 hours, just 1 hour 45 minutes short of 48 hours after the deadline for questions for this council tonight had lapsed. Some questioned the legality of that. It's fair to say, in my opinion, it's hardly democracy or transparency working at its best. On to some of the comments. The biggest concern by most was certainly the plan to utilise flood zone 2 at Bankfields Farm. Draycott has regularly flooded over the years. When I told my family I was moving to Draycott in 2008, my brother said, "Doesn't it flood there?" He didn't even know where Draycott was, but he still had heard of it. As the climate change begins to change, remember that, you lot voted for an emergency on it, it's becoming more of a regular occurrence, especially in Churchwell. If this floodplain is concreted over, where will the water go? Into the new homes that you want to build, or onto the already regularly flooded Midland Main Line, more into Churchwell, nor will it reflect even more residents further along the Derwent and Trent valleys that don't bother any of us borough councillors. The proposed pylons might arrive in very close proximity, more concrete, more flooding problems. Has that even been considered? The clue's in its name, Bankfields Farm. The floodplain has helped to protect Draycott for many years. Its loss will be catastrophic. This site will absolutely exasperate an already existing problem. All present were concerned about the loss of Greenbelt. Once lost, it's gone forever. And when we begin to remove Greenbelt, where does it stop? There's always going to be a housing requirement for never-ending government targets. However, it was said multiple times last night that Greenbelt land should not be touched before all brownfield sites have been exhausted. Have all brownfield sites been exhausted? Road safety was a huge concern. There's a blind bridge for a start over the railway, very close to where the access point will be for this site. A huge visual impairment for road users. There have been many incidents and accidents on Derby Road which would have been the access point to this planned site. 190 homes would almost create another 190 cars, perhaps double or even more. On Derby Road, the parish council has speed indicator devices in situ, very close to this site where its entrance would be, and have data that evidence that cars in this 30-mile-an-hour zone regularly exceed 80 miles an hour, more than occasionally they top 100 miles an hour. The location of this site would be an accident waiting to happen. Draycott has no, that's zero, zip NHS infrastructure. No dentist, no doctor, no nothing. All residents have to go further afield to doctors at Breaston or Borough, and dentists even as far away as Normanton in Derby. But wait, haven't Breaston and Borough also been hit by this? Oh yeah, they have. So where then will these new residents, or existing residents, go in their hour of need? The infrastructure of Draycott won't struggle, it'll implode. From this revised core strategy, there will be a total of 700 homes allocated between Draycott, Breaston and Borough alone. It appears that a holistic approach to this proposal has not been considered, and that the sites have been looked into individually and therefore ignored the impact of these new homes altogether that will have on schools, roads and NHS services. There's a loss of agricultural land to consider, already ploughed and ready for planting. There's the effect on wildlife and nature, trees, ancient hedgerows, owls, bats, newts and voles, to mention just a few. One resident last night, just one, had a neutral position. He was neither for or against this proposal and left the meeting shortly before its end. But at the end, the chairman of the parish council asked for a show of hands who supported this revised core strategy. Guess what? No hand went up, not one. And there were 61 residents against it and 11 parish councillors. It's as plain as your nose on your face that this plan is absolutely in the wrong location. And if it goes ahead, it will create a whole host of anxiety, problems and misery not only for the current residents, but potentially for the residents of the new builds. And I briefly speak from my own heart. I stood on a manifesto to protect the green belt, and I will always stand by that, whether it be my own ward or wider afield throughout Erewash. That from me was an election promise. Any social housing supplied by this proposal will not go to any of the residents or their children. They will go to whoever's at the top of the housing list. This is yet another attack on Erewash Labour on the parishes. They took away concurrent functions and double taxed all residents in every parish, and now not only attack the green spaces, where I represent, but also the flood defences. National government says build, build, build. It echoes Trump's drill, drill, drill. What an association of words and deeds. I listen to the residents of Draycott, and indeed widely in Erewash. Is the controlling group listening? It appears not. It appears that residents' voices are trying to be stilled. I urge all residents to take part in the consultation and encourage their friends, family and neighbours to do the same. What happened to the many, not the few? Many have spoken, few have been heard. My last line comes from A Game of Thrones. Shame, shame, shame.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Follow that. I realise the Labour government are demanding increased housing numbers. What I do find astounding is that you have somehow come up with sites that have been discarded for very good reasons when the core strategy was first put together a year or two ago. I've no doubt you'll be saying this is NIMBYism, but it's not. It's about health and safety and other reasons why some of the sites suggested should be withdrawn. As you might guess, I want to talk about the two proposed sites in my ward, West Hallam. My first question is, has the lead member, Councillor Curtis, actually ever visited the sites? Or have any of the members of the executive visited? When I was leader and we started work on the core strategy, because it was such an important piece of work that can affect many of our residents, myself, my deputy, Councillor Major, and all our other executive members, along with the officers of the planning department and the green spaces team, visited all of the possible sites right across the borough. We did this to look at the pros and the cons of every site, and you can see some of the paperwork that I've still got here that I've kept. We did this, as I say, I can only think that the sites that have been put forward towards, that none of the executive can have visited, or they would see why these sites were discarded before. If I say Beach Lane, the owner of the land that is being put forward on this site, that you want included, has been trying to get development on this land for many, many years. And I know that planning will back me up that, because he has always been rebuffed, and for very good reasons. So what has changed now? It's for years this site has been refused, so why suddenly ripe for development now? This site is directly facing Scargill Primary School, with just over 300 pupils, and Beach Lane is not a very wide road. It's gridlocked at the beginning of the school day and a gate at home time. When I say gridlocked, only last week I witnessed cars and vans mounting the pavement to get past the parked cars. It's not only weekdays as well. We've got a thriving junior football club and they have their matches on our recreation ground next to the school. So again, there's always a lot of parking there. So I just ask, would the Labour members in this council, if your child or grandchild was attending this school, would you want in all conscience to support a development of 90 houses, with the caveat of a large safeguarded area for even more houses if needed, straight facing a primary school entrance? Has the lead member, or again any of the other executive members, bothered looking at the reports on these sites from the original work on the core strategy? If so, then we'll see that Highways had some comments on this. These two sites were to proceed, and we're talking about the Beach Lane and High Lane. I understand that DCC Highways had not been consulted on these new recommendations. I did check, and they said they'd had a couple of calls from the planning department, but they were only about the green belt. Again, if you'd visited the site, you would have seen the problems with the highways issued in West Hallam. If you create no access onto the Beach Lane to leave the village, it's very difficult. Highways are quoted in the previous paperwork, which I have with me tonight again. The junction from Beach Lane to Station Road, they say, and I quote, junction enhancement limited due to an awkward shape of the junction. Also, Station Road leads to a T-junction with a cat and fiddler game. Cat Lane. Again, I would quote highways. There might be some scope for widening and forms of intervention, such as signalisation. However, there would be a challenge in relation to the awkward topography and narrow form of Station Road. I could go on, but hopefully you get my point. That if either of you, any of you had visited the site or read the previous reports, these sites would not have been included as new sites on this strategy. On the High Lane West site, we know the developers have been trying to get buy-up properties on High Lane West to enable no access onto the A609, but to no avail. So now we have an area being put forward, albeit only for 30 houses, but this area floods. The resident who lives on the first house past the footpath is constantly having to bail out the overflow of water from the area. He's collected sandbags from my house. He has, I believe, had to use a pump to keep the water out of his house, and his garden is constantly flooded. The water even crosses the main road and into gardens on the opposite side of the road. And believe me, Severn Trent have declined to do any work in this area. The other thing is access egress. A road coming out into Parkour Lane is to be formed. How ridiculous. This is a very narrow country lane which is only half a dozen houses. It's mainly used for walkers and horse riders. You also have to turn left to get out onto the main road, which means you would join at Millhouse Crossroads, and there's a blind bend on your right hand side. You take your life in your hands. So, these sites have got very good reasons, health and safety, not NIMBYism, I can assure you. So I would also like to ask as well about the evidence about the 40% affordable housing. A survey some years ago showed only limited need for affordable homes in the area, so I'm not sure why the increase without evidence. It was 30, yet for some reason it has now gone up to 40. But for all those reasons, these two sites need removing from the strategy. But what I would plead with you, if you haven't visited these sites, I'm quite willing to meet you any time. Let me show you the reasons why these sites shouldn't go ahead. And when you think about that primary school with 300 young children and see the traffic there, and you're planning on a road straight facing, it's absolutely diabolical. So I would ask that you please don't vote for this and take these two sites out of this core strategy. Thank you.
Councillor Howard, sorry.
As a matter of personal response, since I have been cited as lead member in councillor speeches, I would first like to clarify to Councillor Hart that I have visited the sites in West Hallam, and two, would like to request a point of clarification from Mr Birkinshaw regarding the flooding risk on the southwest of Draycott site, because this is a technical matter which there seems to be some dispute between from councillors.
Thank you. Councillor, nearly called you councillor then. You got promoted.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That may be a matter of opinion. Yes, to a point of clarification in relation to the extent of flood zone 2, as designated by the Environment Agency. In accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework, we're required to have regard to the latest data that's produced in relation to this. I have literally double-checked it on my computer right now, just to confirm that the multiple times I've checked this in the past I was right. And it confirms that the sites are not within flood zone 2. I can explain some of the confusion because the Environment Agency's Section 105 maps, which are publicly available, are out of date on this issue. There is more recent data. This became apparent to this council many years ago when the Environment Agency applied for planning permission on its Noonan Depot site to site flood resilience infrastructure in flood zone 2 according to their own mapping, to which we objected, to which the Environment Agency said, oh, don't worry, our maps are wrong. There's new data is actually been published this week, and it's beginning to come out into the public realm, and I'm very much hoping the agency will correct their maps to the latest flood risk data, which is the data we're required to use for planning. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Major. Thank
Thank you.
It's astonishing, Madam Mayor. With limiting everybody to 6 weeks, they've not even got the correct data. It's astonishing. They've not given people a chance. The whole purpose of being able to have public road shows would have addressed things like this, but yet it gets rejected. I won't question people's memories opposite, but I will say they've got selective memories, because the consultation in 2020 was extended twice, and it was the longest consultation this authority has ever done. So it wasn't 6 weeks by any stretch of the imagination. It never was. However, talking predominantly about Sandiacre, I'm really concerned that people are somehow suggesting that we are anti-ever building anything. As part of the Sandiacre neighbourhood plan, I took the brave step of proposing a site for house building behind Lidl, over the other side of the canal. It went into the draft report, went out to consultation again when Erewash did the consultation, went out to consultation again when the planning inspector did their review, and every single time it's found to be sound. The Borough Council never objected during any of those stages. But recently, I was old hostage, telling I wouldn't be able to have a referendum unless I took that site out. So to suggest to me that I'm not willing to build houses, I am willing to build houses on areas that would have reduced HGV traffic through Sandiacre, because it would have removed warehousing in the centre of the village and improved the centre, on brownfield land, and protected the green belt. What I think is that it was removed because you want to build on green belt. Just like Rachel Reeves has told you, we've heard so many times tonight they're forcing us to do it. It's almost like they've got the fun screws on it, but you can't enjoying it as well at the same time. So we could have in Sandiacre had more houses built. We actually proposed something. I took the brave step, standing there as the Chairman of the Parish Council, putting forward proposals to build houses behind Lidl on the other side of the canal, which would have delivered houses. But instead, I was forced to remove it under the threat that I wouldn't be allowed a referendum unless I did. And only a matter of weeks later, what do we find out? That the council had another site in mind, which I assume they knew about on the green belt, with far more significant problems, far further access to local amenities, far more difficult highways access issues than the one being proposed. And I just don't understand why you're so hell-bent on building on the green belt before you build on brownfield land.
Councillor Bilby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'm in favour of building houses, but in the right places. I'll be voting against these proposed sites in the core strategy tonight. I have visited the site in my ward, Sandiacre, and spoken to residents face to face. I've shared their anger and disbelief that this piece of land has been selected. I hope all the councillors in this chamber tonight have done the same and not hidden behind emails and social media when dealing with such life-changing issues. This site in Sandiacre has not got access suitable for construction traffic, or the volume of traffic it will bring with nearly 200 homes when it's finished. There's a strong possibility that construction would require piling, bringing damage to nearby properties and driving out wildlife in this natural beauty spot which borders the ancient forest. In 26 years as a councillor, this is potentially the most damaging development I've seen in Sandiacre. So please, councillors, vote against this tonight. Listen to the people. They elected you to protect our greenbelt, not destroy it. Please, please, pull back before it's too late.
Councillor Sankovic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be voting against this proposal tonight, and if you look at west of Sandy Acre, I've lived in Sandy Acre for over 37 years, and I know firsthand the value of the area in my ward, and development would ruin the look and the feel of the whole of the community, and local residents are deeply upset about this. Many people have chosen to live in Sandy Acre because of its natural beauty, and particularly Stony Clouds Nature Reserve, the Walk in the Clouds as it's called. And if you look at the views from there, you can see over to Trent and Erewash valleys, attracting visitors and reinforcing our areas as a new character and development of the kind that threatens to maintain this. And when you look at, when they say they're misleading the public, when you think 6 weeks, it's only 4 weeks, because you've got 2 weeks of Easter holidays. So it's only 4 weeks, so get your facts right. And I will hope that all councillors in this chamber will vote against this, because it's because of residents you're here, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Thank you.
Councillor Hall Evans, did you put your hand up, or have I written your name down just for the excitement? Just for excitement. I thought I did, it was my fault, so it'll be Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would applaud what Councillor Scott said. As a parish councillor at Breaston, we mirror Draycott. And we had an extraordinary meeting as well. And we had 120 people there. We counted them thoroughly, Madam Mayor. And there were a few expletives, Madam Mayor, which I wrote to read to you, because, like the deputy, a bit delicate. So I won't do that. But everyone in that room that night was against it. Not one person was for it. So it's not good. So I have a précis of what people said to me on the night, Madam Mayor. Put the glass up. First thing, the change from green belt to grey belt. The parish council strongly opposes the reclassification of land from green belt to grey belt, citing concerns over environmental impact and the precedent it sets for future developments. Item 2, highways issues, where it comes out on a very busy main road. The proposed access to the site is deemed unsuitable for the anticipated number of vehicles resulting from the development of the 50 houses. In particular, Heath Gardens are currently a quiet and narrow cul-de-sac with no pedestrian walkways, not equipped to handle the increased traffic volume, raising safety and congestion concerns. Very, very serious. The third item, biodiversity. The development would result in significant habitat loss, particularly the considerable number of trees, adversely affecting local wildlife. The site serves as a crucial buffer between existing houses and the motorway with a lot of noise. Increasing noise, disturbance and air pollution. Item 4, flood risk. It certainly does flood. Everyone knows it floods. The land within the proposed site has an extremely high water table and is prone to frequent flooding during the adverse weather conditions. The parish council highlights that current flood alleviation measures have proven insufficient. Additional hard-standing services and loss of natural soakaway land would exacerbate existing flood risks, making the proposed development inadvisable. And the lady that spoke earlier, next week I'm going to be joining Green Squeeze, because it sounds a fantastic thing to join. And I urge you to join Green Squeeze, because I'm going to join it next week. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hall Evans, I've triggered you off now, haven't I? So I'll let you speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, apologies. I felt the need to speak. If I reflect on my time as a councillor, one of the things that hit me most was when, in Canal Ward alongside Councillor Corbett, we were there, as many of us were, during Storm Babette, actually helping residents protect their houses, literally pumps, buckets. So I cannot with good conscience vote for building on Greenbelt. Houses do need to be built, but they need to be built in the right place, because we cannot risk. I don't want to ever see any councillor having to go and support a resident in a moment of crisis when their house is flooding. Maybe the plans don't have that land as floodplain, category, whatever you want to call it. But when you're there, eye to eye with a resident whose house is at genuine risk, I don't want to be there again, so I will not be voting for this. Thank you.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think anybody would dispute that there is a need for housing in Erewash, and everybody wants everybody else to have a decent home to live in and raise their family and call their own. I think part of the issue here is that the number of homes that Erewash is required to build isn't actually decided by Erewash. It's decided nationally by a couple of fairly crude calculations. So these numbers are being imposed on this council, and they're very high numbers, and they may be more than we actually need, but I do appreciate there isn't much of a choice there, but I just wanted to point that out. So you've got a high number of houses required, and you're also asking people to give up their green belt for those houses to be built, and people are always going to react against that, and it's really easy to just dismiss those reactions and those objections as NIMBYism. But local knowledge is valuable. People know the area where they live, and I know through personal experience of filling sandbags, putting them in a wheelbarrow, and literally building a dam to stop water going into people's houses. And this was where that field is. And when Councillor Miller says there's a high water table, it's true, and I'll tell you how we know there's a high water table. Because when they're digging the graves on the cemetery, they're having to get a pump and pump the water out of the grave and get the water out for long enough that they can give somebody a decent burial. So, you know, we're not imagining this. It really is very, very wet down there. So I don't think this plan should go forward with that site included, and I know other people have got, you know, genuine concerns about their sites. I don't necessarily have the local knowledge to comment on that. But I'd also like to add that it shouldn't go forward until developers are required to do more with regards to climate change. Supplying one EV charging point is the very, very minimum that we should be requiring people to do. Why aren't we also asking them to install the highest possible standards of insulation? Why aren't we asking them to have some form of on-site renewable energy generation? Why aren't we asking them to put heat pumps in instead of gas boilers? If we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Thank you.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The village of Borough is looking at a possible 400 new buildings next year if the current plans by EBC go ahead. Almost 400 new homes would mean the possibility of 600 to 800 extra cars on our already dilapidated and very busy roads. If there is an average of 2 children per home, then that would make approximately 800 children needing schools local to where they live. We don't have the capacity for this. Investigating how many vacancies there are in our local schools, they would not cope with more than 40 or 50. And with Borough infants and juniors, there is no room for significant expansion. Our doctors are currently struggling, and appointment waiting times can be very long when trying to book an appointment. Local dentists are putting patients on a waiting list at the moment, and in Borough we have limited greenbelt land as it is. That greenbelt land is precious to us. We recognise a need for more housing, but why does it have to be on greenbelt when there are brownfield sites available? The plan to build 29 homes on the Harrington Green Avenue field is something that all the people who live near this field, and there are many, are very concerned about. This land has had dangerous chemicals and deposits identified. It has been deemed a medium to high risk for people's health. There are vulnerable children living with their families near this field. Their parents are very worried. We ask you, please do not build here. Leave those dangerous deposits buried and let the people who live nearby enjoy this green field. It's not ever so big. Let them keep it. Children play on it and people walk their dogs. When greenbelt land is taken, we can never get it back. Please don't rush into building on them when there are alternatives available. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhurst.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a serious need for new housing in Erewash. This authority has never once met its housing targets. Meanwhile, real house prices have doubled since the 90s, locking many people out of home ownership. We've been letting down those that rely on this authority for council housing. There are over 5,000 people currently waiting for a suitable home, of which well over 2,000 are children. 2,000 children waiting for a suitable home is not acceptable. We have a moral duty to build new homes. We have a great borough, and I want the next generation to be able to live in it. I want them to be able to raise families, and I want them to be able to enjoy our borough as many people in this room have already done. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Mascallett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to clarify, Brook and Borough Parish Council actually has this item on our agenda next week at our Parish Council meeting. So perhaps Councillor White would like to withdraw her erroneous comment earlier. Also, Councillor White brings off other erroneous comments in her latest speech, and one of them is about dentists. Interestingly, I would address Councillor Scott. If they're having trouble with dentist appointments in Draycott, you go down Victoria Road, which I did today to get here, and the dentist on Victoria has a sign hanging out. He needs patients because he isn't fulfilling his NHS quota. So I'd suggest they all go there. Okay?
Can you please be quiet in the gallery?
It's an NHS sign hanging outside. Anyways, it says NHS. I don't know how much we're clear. But I also can remember a council meeting 2 years ago when Councillor Major kept asking Councillor Dawson, are you a builder or a blocker? Well, today it seems quite clear Councillor Major was a blocker all along. May I also refresh the memories of some of the Conservatives that when they were the lead group, they proposed 600 plus houses in Greenbelt Field east of Borough that would have then brought Borough and Draycott closer together. Now we have a field, 280 house
Quiet,
site.
please.
280.
Councillor Major. Please, I've said allow everybody to speak into it. Councillor Major. Councillor Major, this is your last warning.
So now we have a 280 house site proposed on a field to the left, to the west of Borough. That field sits. It's a field that hasn't been farmed in 10 years, and it's such a dead field. At one time, the Conservative Parish Council from years ago was proposing that part of it be a cemetery. Now, I can think that it would be more worthwhile for housing than a cemetery. The field is surrounded by houses on one side, houses in the Nottingham Derby Road on the other, the A52 on the third side, and the fourth side, the city of Derby. This is classified as greenbelt. It's a field that's in disuse, and it has a public footpath running through it that goes from the Nottingham Road to the A52. Good luck in crossing the A52 when cars are going 70 miles an hour and there's a divide of guardrails in the middle to get to Ockbrook. It isn't used. The field is useless in the parish, in Erewash specifically. What it can be brought to use is with housing. Now, a former Erewash Borough councillor here suggested on Facebook that it was opposite his church of St. Hugh's Catholic Church. And what a better way to go than to get membership, because statistically, people moving into those houses, some of them will be Catholic. You'll be getting them as members. It was noted membership of churches.
Please, can we have some silence in the room, please?
It was noted early, church membership around is going down because there's not enough people. And yet it could become a hub of the community as well. So it's a win-win. We also have other situations where, why are the Conservatives looking at the current situation as they do? When we look at UK housing stock, we see the UK has the oldest housing stock in Europe. 38% of our houses were built before 1946. The EU has an average of 18%. 78% of homes in the UK were built before 1980. EU average is 66%. 1 in 5 houses in the UK, 21%, were built prior to 1919. Belgium is the only country with a higher percentage at 22%. The UK housing stock is heavily influenced by the legacy of homes built during the Industrial Revolution, which still form the backbone of urban areas. Energy efficiency on 80% of UK housing stock is a challenge, as they were built in less stringent environmental standards. At the end of the day, the UK housing stock has been rated the worst value for money in any advanced economy in the world. So how did we get here? We got here through dither and delay, with housing over 14 years, which led to a managed decline. The Conservatives now claim that our services will be affected, such as schools. Well, I have news. The primary school in Erewash is undersubscribed. Teachers may be laid off next year, and in a few years' time, if numbers don't go up, it could face part closure. So this is not good news. This is dark news. Housing brings in new families, and we get new children going to the schools. The businesses would welcome more businesses through development, and are the Conservatives anti-business
Councillor
now?
Masclete, you're very close to your time now.
Okay. The development will bring more social cohesion. Are the Conservatives...
Right, I'm just going to stop this now, please. You've all had your opportunity to speak, and they have kept quiet on that side. Have some respect and do it the same on the other. Thank you.
Yeah. Are the Conservatives now anti-business? The development will bring more social cohesion. Are the Conservatives against social cohesion? Children growing up in Erewash would have the very, very real possibility of raising their families in Erewash through this development. Are the Conservatives against generations of families living together in the same village? Are the Conservatives against upgrading the housing stock? I say to the people who are caught in the Conservative orbit on this issue, growth doesn't mean losing what we have. It means enhancing what we have. Change is hard, but it is constant. If we don't change, we go stale and our quality of life fails.
Councillor Masclete, your time is up now.
Okay, can I just one sentence more? It is necessary to keep our schools open, full of young, talented minds. It is necessary to make our services fit for the 21st century and beyond. Thank you very much.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I think I'd like to start by apologising to some of the members of the public who might have read on a flyer or a leaflet that they can come to this meeting tonight to have their say. Well, I'm sorry, but you have been cruelly misled by people who have already seen how desperate they are, and who, because they sold this borough short of both its housing stock and its finances, we are in the position of having to take corrective measures. As already been said many times, our housing targets have not been met since 2011, which not only left us short of housing stock, but also those financial rewards that we got when we met our targets, or should have met our targets. There was something called the New Homes Bonus, which became like a Scotch mist. It just disappeared into the ether. No wonder we were nearly bankrupt. The result has already been said. We've now got some 5,000 people in Erewash who don't have a decent home. And as Councillor Mascalick has already hinted at, we also need to replace a lot of our very aged stock, the Victorian stock, which is environmental, or it doesn't meet its environmental targets. And I do find it ironic that we have members of the Conservative Party here who are trying to disrupt the building of new homes, when the mantra of the Thatcher years was that everyone should be able to live in a decent home. What's happened to that idea? Well, we've heard little bits of it here and there. It's not that we don't want people to live in houses. We do want houses built, but it's just not in our backyards. We want them built somewhere else. This plan will deliver a range of decent homes. And unlike the Conservative version, you can remember that far back, I'm sure, 90% of their development was north of Sandiacre, around Ilkeston. Ilkeston has 1% of the green belt of Erewash, 73%. Ilkeston has 1%, and they were going to build on it. Ilkeston had no green belt at all. As I said, this plan is in its early stages. It's not a final deal. Members of the public will have a period of time to consult on all the various aspects of this plan. When I was first elected, and that's 34 years ago, I took an oath to serve my constituents. And I believe in passing this plan, I am serving my constituents, not only legally, because we have a legal duty to pass this plan, but morally as well. Because a lot of those families that need decent homes are in my ward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Eadie and then Councillor Mee, and that will be the end, and then we'll move on to their thing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to all the residents who have come here today. I know it's a really, really important issue for people. Councillor Phillips, I think people think they have their say, because item 3 on the agenda is public questions. But the issue is the paperwork didn't come out to the 19th.
I do agree that's something that should be investigated.
And it should be investigated, because people could have had their
Councillor
say.
Phillips, you're talking over somebody else as well.
I actually agree with it. We'll let that stay.
But I know we agreed with you.
21.1, Madam Mayor.
We will look into that matter.
Thank you.
And your mic's still on, by the way. He knew he was going to speak, didn't he?
He did, he kept it on. So I totally think that the public are here today wanting to have their say, and they have been prevented, and I do think that is incredibly unfair for the residents of this borough. Secondly, I represent Bredsall Village in this council, and I want to speak about a couple of the proposals around the land north of Bredsall Hilltop. So in this plan, it's recommended that 160 homes to be built at Bredsall Hilltop, which I quote, will form an extension to the Oakwood neighbourhood. Now, before I get into why I'm against this being included, I've got a number of comments and observations about the details in the pack we have. So, on page 63, bullet point 1, says Hunger Hill Crescent. Now, Hunger Hill Crescent doesn't exist. It's Hunger Hill Close. Now, a close, by definition, is normally a cul-de-sac, which isn't actually a road used for access. And so I don't think it's correct that in our documentation it should say Hunger Hill Crescent, because that is not actually there. Secondly, on the map included on page 94, it doesn't actually take into account that there's already building next to the proposed site, and it's called Jarrose Country Park Estate. And that is already built there, and I think if we're giving residents the opportunity to look at the information, all the information should be correct and up to date. If you Google Maps it, you can see there's a new development that's not included on the maps that we have today. So we need to make sure everyone has all the information before it goes to consultation, and that information has to be correct. This afternoon I spoke to Bredsall Parish Council, and they were telling me about the history of the site, and that in 2022 it was deemed not deliverable and not developable due to its location within its designated greenbelt, and the sustainable reduction in openness and gap between Derby urban area and settlement of Bredsall meant it was not considered to be sustainable as a strategic development opportunity. So this now, thanks Carol, so basically it now means that Derby and Bredsall, the only thing that will be separating them is the Great Northern Greenway, reducing Bredsall's village-like feel, and I don't think that is fair on residents. So, on to Bredsall itself. It suffers from flooding. Every time there is poor weather, it suffers from flooding, and I've been told that this has happened more frequently since the building at Lime Lane on the Derby border. So, if there's more building, there'll be more flooding. It's likely it's going to have more flooding, and that really, really scares the residents that it affects day to day. Also, Bredsall is used as a rat run between the A608 and the A61. So people get onto the A38. More houses means more cars used in the village, also means more doctors, dentists and children including school places. We need the infrastructure for these new developments, but we also need to protect the residents already in our communities. Local people know their areas best and the impact this development is going to have on them. We need to consult properly and make sure the consultation documents are correct and accurate. I cannot support this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to be talking about my ward. I shall reserve my comments on that until the consultation. That said, I totally agree with everything that Councillor Hart raised about the two sites in West Hallam. A question: what's the best way to eat an elephant? Answer: one bite at a time. What's the best way to join Nottingham and Derby, despite there being a legally binding expanse of greenbelt between the two cities? Answer: one bite at a time. To me, this is all about the greenbelt, the status of the greenbelt. I know we've had to draw this document up at speed, but the issue to me is that we're just taking bites of the greenbelt. The greenbelt status hasn't changed. There should be a full greenbelt review, and yes, possibly some of it should change, but it hasn't at this stage. And while there are parcels of land which are still greenbelt, I will oppose large-scale developments on them. Since I was elected in 2019, I've spoken against each and every proposal to allow large-scale developments on the greenbelt. Didn't matter where it was. I spoke against building at Cotmanay Wood, at Kirkhallam, Acorn Way, Spondon Wood. My biggest concern, as I've said before, is actually, and I know we've now given planning permission, was actually at Spondon Wood and Acorn Way, because there they were two developments that were really moving Derby closer to us. In a previous debate, I made a prediction, one that I'll repeat. I've got no doubt that this is going to pass tonight, of course, but I'm convinced that in 15 years' time, when all these new sites are full of houses, there'll still be none at Stanton. despite 1,000 being earmarked there. And then, of course, the developers and the government will want another bite of the elephant. I'm going to finish on a party political point, though. Sorry about that, because I really can't believe the hypocrisy of some of the Conservative members of this council. It was they who first started biting the elephant with their proposals in their core strategy, but now they cry foul when the Labour administration do nothing more than follow the precedent that's been set. The Conservatives were wrong then, Labour are wrong now. I don't eat elephants, so I shall be voting against this.
Councillor Everett, you had the right to speak, reserve the right to speak, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to just first issue a few kind of statements about what councillors opposite have said, but I won't go too deeply into it as I have some other things to say as well. But first I would like to just address my disappointment that councillors opposite do not believe officers. They don't believe that officers have done their due diligence, and that's a real shame because as they full know, that they are our experts and we should be guided by them, and it's a shame that councillors opposite disregard that entirely. But moving on from my disappointment, Councillor Miller stated that biodiversity will be lost. In England, biodiversity net gain is required under a statutory framework. It's referred to as biodiversity net gain, and in planning practice guidance to distinguish it from other more kind of general biodiversity gains. The objective is for development to deliver at least a 10% increase in biodiversity value relative to the pre-development. I'd also like to note that no one has accused anyone from our side, well, very few people have accused anyone of NIMBYism. What we do want to do on this side of the chamber is highlight the importance of building, and I'll come on to that later. To address Councillor White's comments, Harrington Avenue is neither in the plan nor is it in the Greenbelt, so I'm not sure what she was suggesting with her comments earlier. Councillor Scott implied that we should not meet housing targets. I'd just like to remind the Chamber, Madam Mayor, that it's a legal duty to meet our housing targets, admittedly one that the Conservatives failed to do since they were introduced in 2011, but a legal duty nonetheless. I'll go further on a little later on as to why it's a moral duty as well. But he also asked the question, what's happened to the many, not the few? The many need secure homes. Building houses is a moral obligation. Erewash Borough Council currently has well over 5,000 people on the social housing waiting list. That's 2,172 children. As Councillor Broadhurst highlighted earlier, that's terrible. Over 2,000 children who are currently not in suitable accommodation. We have 65 households that are actively homeless. That can mean on the streets, in insufficient accommodation, often in mouldy, overcrowded accommodation or sofa serving. That's not 65 people, that's 65 households. That will include children as well. 88 households are currently on Band A needs. Now, for those who don't know, Band A is for emergency priority. This often means that people are staying in their home are at risk of violence in their current home, or their current home provided by a social housing provider is in such a state of disrepair that they cannot live there. It is impossible for them to live there safely. But there is nowhere to move those households to, and that's why we have a moral duty to provide them by building. I'd also like to highlight the hypocrisy from the Conservatives tonight. Let us not forget that the building blocks of this plan is theirs. This is the Conservative plan that we wanted to change, and under the orders from the last government, they prevented us. We knew that the original plan was a bad plan, which is why we tried to change it. But then it went to the planning inspector, who agreed with us. It's a bad plan. But we've now made the necessary changes to a much better plan. But let's once again be clear These changes are ones the Conservatives would have had to have made because their plan was so bad it had to be scrapped. Now back to the moral duty. For the vast majority of people, being on social housing wait list means that they are not in stable homes. 4% of our borough, 4% of the population is currently waiting for a home. And why is that important? Well, housing stability is better for people's mental health and physical health. It has a significant impact on children's development, especially their education. So those that are worried about school places, what I'm worried about is that children in schools do not have a safe place to sleep at night, and it is so important that we make those safe places. Now I know Councillor Hart's laughing, which is very upsetting, but I would like to point out that even in if new homes are being built, if they're not built for low income, people on low incomes, those people do benefit from building because it frees up affordable properties. And I have evidence for that if they're concerned. We've got articles from Lying and Kinstrom, Jack Leeson, which is published by the Greater London Authority, Glaser and Yorko, published by the Journal of Economic Perspectives, and Evan Mass, published by the Journal of Urban Economics. It is so important that we build homes. If we don't build homes, children in our borough are not sleeping safely at night. We have over 2,000 of them right now who do not have stable accommodation. I want that to change. I'd like to change it immediately. I can't make it change immediately, but I will be voting for this because by the time this plan ends, I want them in stable homes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Howard, would you move that you can speak?
I won't take very long now, Your Worship. Thank you for coming back to me. In closing, I would just like to restate my deep appreciation for the hard work of council planning officers, as well as to all of the members of the public who have both attended this evening and have contacted me in the past week, and to all councillors this evening for participating in this robust debate. I fully encourage everyone, absolutely everyone, to contribute to both the 6-week consultation period commencing in April and then to the independent planning inspector's inquiry process later this year. Also, since I'm already stood up and to save Councillor Major a job, I request a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to do a recorded vote, and it is on the original agenda for pardon? Yeah, I haven't finished yet, Councillor Phillips. For the recommendations on the 2.1 A to C on the substantive vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors then, recorded vote. Councillors Alfrey.
For.
Atkinson.
For.
Bilby.
Against.
Broadhurst.
For.
Ryan.
For.
Burns. Mrs. Clare. Corbett. Doyle. Mrs. Eddy. Everett. Miss Fennelly. Flatley. Green. M. Griffiths. Hall Evans. Hare. Mrs. Hart. Howard. Lambert. Locke. McGuinness. Major. Maskalick. Me. Miller. Mills. Dr. Newton. Pace. F. Phillips. P. Phillips. Mrs. Poole. Sangera. Scott. Snaith. Stratford. Thomas. And Mrs. White.
Okay, that carries. That concludes the business of the extraordinary meeting. I'd just like to thank the public, both in the gallery and the committee room, for attending today. Thank you very much.